Everybody come see us on tour. We'll be in Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
This is Russell Dobular here with Keaton Weiss and our guest Lee Fang, who has been dropping a lot of tweets kind of designed to shoot at every bottle on every tree stump of every ideology. So we actually covered this on election night. Completely agree with Elon that Democrats have widely censored, but if the last year has shown us anything, the Republicans will more than happily censor anything critical of Israel and smear anyone who speaks out as an anti-Semite or a terrorist. Now, you got a little pushback on this, and I just want to point out some developments since you tweeted this. There was much rejoicing that Trump, seemingly under pressure from his base, announced that he wouldn't appoint Mike Pompeo to his cabinet, and yet he did appoint Zionist maniac, Russophobic, very pro-Ukraine war supporter, Elise Stefanik. The choice of Stefanik signals a more combative U.S. posture toward the UN. Stefanik has frequently criticized the international organization, particularly over its criticism of Israel, this CNN, and last month said the Biden administration should consider a complete reassessment of U.S. funding for the UN if the Palestinian Authority continues to pursue a push to revoke Israel's UN membership. Now, let's remember, she was also a leading figure in the persecution of the college deans who refused to stop protests on their campuses or to define them as de facto anti-Semitism. So what does this say about the real commitment to freedom of speech? I have no doubt you're going to be able to gender people any way you want under a Trump regime, but what does this mean for pro-Palestine protests? Are they going to support that kind of speech?
I think this is a question where the answer is still up in the air. There are very powerful neoconservative voices still in the orbit of Trump world. Stefanik being appointed, or will be appointed to the UN, is a great example of this. These folks do not care about free speech. They will host a congressional hearing about the need for free speech. And actually, Stefanik's a good example of this. If you look back, she's on this congressional committee that deals with higher education. If you look back 6 months before October 7th of last year, she's hosting these hearings about the crisis of free speech on college campuses. You can't speak your mind on college campuses. We need more free speech on college campuses. The moment after October 7th, she's bringing in these university presidents, berating them by exaggerating and inventing claims that there were chants around killing Jewish students and demands for a second Holocaust, and demanding censorship, demanding that there be a crackdown on pro-Palestinian advocacy, and these student groups like Students for Justice in Palestine would be kicked off campus or disciplined in some way. So complete reversal once there's an emergency. Of course, many supporters of free speech are fair weather supporters on both the left and right. It's easy to support it when you're looking at censors at the other side of the aisle. It's harder to support it when it's your own team doing it. That being said, there are still a lot of interesting figures in Trump world that, even if they, I think there's a principled support of free speech. They kind of realize the basic fundamental value. Some of these folks from the kind of San Francisco podcast VC world that do have an ear in the Trump world. Vivek Ramaswamy, also I think very principled on free speech. He's still in the orbit. Tulsi Gabbard, David Sachs. That's what kind of makes the Trump world very interesting, because there is a very active push and pull. Someone who's influential one day could be pushed out the next. We'll see what the future holds, but on issues around Israel, I'm not holding my breath. The major Republican super PAC donors to the Trump campaign were people who are very hawkish on Israel. Miriam Edelman, Adelson, Paul Singer, several others that are just very pro-Israel. So, I think it's TBD, but likely to be a very centrist pro-Israel administration.
I mean, this Israel issue seems to be one where, like, values seem to go out the window. There seems to be an Israel exception for so many of these people. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a guy like RFK Jr., he made, a very central pillar to his campaign when he ran as a Democrat and then as an independent prior to dropping out was free speech. And yet when Bill Ackman's, tweeting out how these university, presidents have to go, RFK, he's retweeting Bill Ackman. Like it just goes out the window. Seems to be the one issue that across the board, even people who you look to as being very principled in other areas seem to have an exception. And so, look, I mean, Stefanik, she's UN ambassador. She's not going to be in a position to censor speech, but it is reflective of a certain value set.
Yeah,
especially,
he's throwing a bone to Miriam there.
Right, exactly. And that's not going to be the first one. That's not going to be the only one, right? I mean, that's the way you kind of have to look at that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, here's the kind of rub. I mean, there's a lot of focus on X and on Twitter as a platform, but it looks like TikTok and Facebook have been censoring pro-Palestinian speech at a much higher degree. That's on the basic kind of evidence that we see. And I did a story earlier this year. There's a former Israeli intelligence-backed NGO called Cyberwell that works with all the other kind of anti-disinformation, anti-hate speech NGOs that work kind of in the back end to enact these content moderation and censorship demands on the big platforms. The big question is, as the Trump administration gets in, they're going to try to clean house at the State Department, at the DHS, and other agencies that have brought in these NGOs and kind of given them, if not government financial backing, kind of the credibility backing to pressure these platforms. There's going to be a very new dynamic, I think, with the Elon Musk and others who are a little bit more opposed to these dynamics. And it's a big question of whether the pro-Israel groups can shoehorn themselves in to continue censoring, because there's government censorship, there's private sector censorship, but then there's also kind of this mix where these NGOs and governments collaborate. And I think that was the Twitter files, right?
Right.
Everybody come see us on tour. We'll be in Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.